Welcome to medieval history. Today, we're plunging into the brutal and transformative centuries of the British Isles, a period defined by fire, blood, and the clash of two mighty cultures, the Vikings versus the Saxons. This wasn't just a series of raids, it was an existential struggle for control of England, decided by key battles and the iron will of one remarkable king. The story begins innocently enough. For centuries after the Romans left, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms like Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex had slowly consolidated power in what would become England. They were farmers, craftsmen, and kings building a nascent civilization. Then, in the late 8th century, everything changed. The year 793 AD is often cited as the official start of the Viking Age, marked by the shocking and brutal raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne off the coast of Northumbria. The Vikings, known as the Norsemen or Danes, were not initially interested in conquest, but in plunder, gold, silver, and slaves. They struck quickly from their longships, vanished with their loot, and left behind terror. However, by the mid-9th century, the motivation shifted from quick raids to permanent settlement. In 865 AD, a massive force arrived, which the Anglo-Saxons called the Great Heathen Army. This was not a raiding party. It was a military invasion led by some of the most fearsome figures of the age, including the sons of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. Their goal was simple: to conquer the wealthy, fragmented Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The Great Heathen Army swept through the north and east of England with terrifying efficiency. One by one, the powerful kingdoms fell. Northumbria collapsed in 867 AD. Mercia crumbled a few years later. East Anglia was overrun, and its king, Edmund, was martyred. By the 800s and 70s, only one kingdom remained defiant: Wessex, ruled by its young king, Alfred. Alfred the Great inherited a kingdom on the brink of total collapse. The Vikings, led primarily by the formidable chieftain Guthrum, were poised to finish the job. In 878 AD, the Vikings launched a surprise winter attack, nearly capturing Alfred and forcing him to flee into the marshes of Athelney in Somerset. This was the lowest point for the Anglo-Saxons. Alfred was not ruling from a palace. He was a desperate fugitive hiding in the mud, barely an hour ahead of his enemies. But Alfred was not just a warrior. He was a brilliant strategist and an inspirational leader. During his time in the marshes, he didn't give up. Instead, he planned. He covertly raised a new army, using local levies and summoning his loyal nobles. His determination culminated a few months later in the decisive Battle of Edington in 878 AD. Alfred's unified West Saxon army met Guthrum's Viking forces. This was a battle for the very existence of the Anglo-Saxon identity. The result was a stunning and comprehensive victory for Alfred. He defeated the Great Heathen Army, forcing Guthrum and his remaining men to surrender and retreat. Alfred didn't just win a battle, he secured a peace treaty known as the Treaty of Wedmore. The terms were revolutionary. Guthrum agreed to withdraw from Wessex, and critically, he agreed to convert to Christianity, with Alfred acting as his godfather. This not only provided a spiritual veneer to the peace, but also established a degree of cultural common ground. The Treaty of Wedmore established a critical political boundary, dividing England between the Saxons and the Vikings. The area under Danish control, stretching across the northeast of England, became known as the Danelaw. While a Viking territory, it brought an end to the initial era of unending warfare. This period of cohabitation was fascinating. Both peoples lived under their own distinct legal systems, Saxon law in the south and Norse law in the north. But trade and interaction were constant, leading to a profound intermingling of cultures. Alfred used this breathing room not to rest, but to completely reform his kingdom. He realized that a fragmented, outdated defense could never hold against the centralized, professional Viking army. He launched several major initiatives. First, the Boer system. Alfred built a network of fortified towns, or burhs, across Wessex. These fortresses were strategically placed and garrisoned year-round, ensuring that no place was more than a day's ride from safety. These burhs would later become the foundation of many modern English towns, demonstrating Alfred's foresight in urban planning and national defence. Second, he recognised the threat came by sea. So Alfred commissioned a new fleet of ships, larger and more stable than the Viking longships, essentially founding the English navy. Finally, and perhaps most enduringly, Alfred was also a great scholar. He codified West Saxon law into the Doom Book and famously promoted literacy by translating important Latin works into Old English, ensuring that knowledge would not vanish in the chaos. These reforms transformed Wessex from a beleaguered kingdom into a resilient, centralized power. Alfred wasn't just King of Wessex. He began to be called the King of the Anglo-Saxons, unifying the disparate English peoples under a single banner for the first time. The very idea of an English nation, as opposed to a collection of competing kingdoms, was solidified during Alfred's reign. The conflict didn't end with Alfred. His children and grandchildren, most notably his son Edward the Elder and his grandson Athelstan, spent the next century systematically conquering the Danelaw. These successors used Alfred's burh system and his unified military structure to push the boundary northward, slowly reclaiming lost territory. By 954 AD, the last Viking king of York was expelled, and Alfred's grandson, King Edred, had finally united the country into a single kingdom of England. The struggle between the Vikings and the Saxons was one of conquest and defence, but it was also one of profound cultural fusion. Viking influence is visible everywhere in English culture. Language, common words like skull, leg, sky, and even the plural pronoun, they come from Old Norse. Law, the Danelaw introduced new legal concepts that persisted for centuries. Art and coinage. The blending of styles is evident in surviving artifacts. The Viking attempt to destroy the Anglo-Saxons ultimately failed, largely thanks to the strategic brilliance and unwavering commitment of Alfred the Great. He didn't just save Wessex, he laid the political, military, and cultural foundations for the nation of England itself. And that is the epic story of the Vikings versus the Saxons. If you enjoyed this historical deep dive, please hit that like button and subscribe to Medieval History for more stories from the past. Let us know in the comments below. Which king was the greater leader, Alfred or Guthrum? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.